bringing attention to the destruction of the 3 World Trade Center towers in New York City on September 11th, 2001, and a whole lot more. This is 9/11 Free Fall. Good evening, everyone. This is Andy Steele. Thanks for listening. Tonight, my guest is John Michael Talboo. He's back on here, and he's going to be talking about the disinformation that is floating around out there within the 9/11 truth movement. And in my opinion, it's out there to try to discredit the 9/11 truth movement by associating it with silly theories. In particular, we're going to be talking about that theory that some folks have been trying to push, in which they believe that no planes hit the World Trade Center towers on 9/11. So we're going to be debunking that and just talking about disinformation in general. It's a very interesting discussion, so stay tuned, and we'll be playing that very shortly. Before I do get into that interview, though, I just want to go over a few things. We got this article up here at AE911truth.org titled, "When 9/11 is Used as a Pretext for Drone Warfare, AE911 Truth Speaks Out." This was written by AE911 Truth staff. It says, even after 12 years, 9/11 is still used as a justification for U.S. drone strikes. The ongoing use of 9/11 to justify all manner of U.S. government policies makes the input of AE911 Truth experts imperative to any discussion of these policies. To that end, AE911 Truth was represented with a table at the 2013 Code Pink Global Drone Summit held at the Georgetown University School of Law Auditorium in Washington, D.C. There were over 400 attendees, plus thousands watching the live stream and C-SPAN coverage, and over 150 press clips, including one on NBC News. The summit was organized by CodePink.org's Progressive Think Tank Institute for Policy Studies, The Nation magazine, and National Lawyers Guild, the Georgetown chapter, and it brought together drone survivors and families of victims from Pakistan and Yemen, human rights advocates, lawyers, authors, social media experts, technology experts, artists and musicians, and grassroots activists. More information is at this article. So I wanted to highlight this story because this just illustrates for the umpteenth time why this issue that we talk about every week on this show is so important, and why we need to keep on going back to 9/11, to the hard science of 9/11, because all of these other issues that are protested now, here 12 years later, that continue to plague our nation, to plague our world, have spun off from 9/11, the drone strikes being one of them. And I've said it before on the show, at least I think I've said it before, that the drone issue is one of the first things that opened my eyes to the bigger world, the fact that you have all of these innocent people being killed. So it is absolutely relevant, it is absolutely important to the mission of AE911 Truth, and to the people that talk about the hard science of what actually happened on 9/11, to be reminded of this, to be reminded of what you are actually fighting for. It's so easy for folks to get tired, to say, well, that happened 12 years ago, you know, and time is passing, less people care about this than they did when when they first woke up to it, in times around like 2006 to 2007. People started looking at this in a different light, started seeing the evidence coming out. You know, that time has passed. Why are we still talking about this? Is there any chance of waking people up? Well, there is absolutely a chance because of issues like this, because the post-9/11 world marches on. So if you want to read that article, again, that's at AE911truth.org. If you go there, too, there's an article as well at the very top of the page. Says, the 9/11 attacks keeping the lid on the lie. Media response to the growing influence of the 9/11 truth movement. This is part 3 in a series by Elizabeth Woodworth. This was originally featured at globalresearch.ca. And the article starts off, says, it is impossible to keep the lid on a lie forever, especially a major deception carried out in full view of witnesses and cameras. The last article in the media response series was published in February of 2010, when the public broadcasters in 8 countries were reporting doubts about the official 9/11 story, and 9 corporate media reviews had explored the issue during the previous year. Since then, the mainstream media has forged ahead on this subject. In the past 6 months alone, 20 stories in major papers have covered the September to December 2013 Rethink 9/11 campaign, including including Time Magazine, the New York Times, the Ottawa Citizen, and BBC News Magazine. As time passes, our memories of 9/11 become less painful and more open to public discussion. There is increasing skepticism in both the social and corporate media about the credibility of 9/11 as the foundation for the continuing global war on terror. Last year, President Obama was prevented from waging, on grounds of state terrorism, war with Syria. And that is another accomplishment of the 9/11 Truth movement. Because as we wake people up, as we make them just begin to just even take that first step towards questioning the events of 9/11, all these other issues, like I discussed before, are suddenly have a spotlight thrown over them. All right, they're looked at in a whole different way. And people may not be as excited to go running headfirst into another conflict. People are not as war frenzied as we saw in the lead up to Iraq. And the fact that the people stood up, the fact that people called Congress in unprecedented amounts and just droves constantly to protesting outside the White House, the fact that the people were able to rise up and voice their opposition to that potential war in Syria and make the war establishment back down, make President Obama back down, is a tremendous accomplishment. Not just for America, but for 9/11 Truth, because 9/11 Truth has succeeded in opening the eyes of so many people and changing the paradigm of so many American citizens. So it's absolutely influencing the future. So these two articles right here at ae911truth.org really drive home why we are fighting and why we are keeping this issue alive and why ultimately we are going to have real justice in the end, because people are sick of it. People are waking up. And as this article by Elizabeth Woodworth says later in its text, it says, establishing the truth about 9/11 is a fundamental necessity for the achievement of peace between East and West. I couldn't have said it better myself. So moving on to the topic of our show and into disinformation, I want to play first for you this video that David Chandler has out. It was released on 9/11 Bloggers, where I saw it, and it's on YouTube. Is the original source. I believe it was last week. But in it, he talks about what classifies as the hard evidence, what it is important to focus on. And he lays it out in 3 points, three or four points at the very beginning, in the first 3 minutes of his video. Now, the whole video itself is close to a half an hour long, so I'm not going to be able to play that for you. But to really focus on why I wanted to do this show tonight and focus on the disinformation that's out there to try to make the 9/11 Truth itself look foolish, to associate it with crazy nonsense theories. I wanted to play this and have David Chandler act as a sort of introduction to this topic tonight, because he really drives it home in these first 3 minutes. So I'm going to play that for you right now.
One of the hardest things to do when we're talking about the events of 9/11 is that it was such a huge, complex event. There's so many things happening. Everybody can see there are anomalies. You know, things happened and you know that shouldn't have happened, this shouldn't have happened, and so forth. Why did the buildings come down? Why weren't the planes intercepted? How did the hijackers manage to do what they did, and so forth? One of the problems with trying to cover the whole waterfront in discussing 9/11 is that how strongly we are certain of various elements, it varies a lot. Like what happened at the Pentagon, what happened out in Pennsylvania where the plane went down, what happened at the World Trade Center. I've come to believe that what we really need to do is to focus on the elements of the events of 9/11 that have been the most strongly analyzed and established, so that we know what happened and we know that the official story is a fabrication at that stage. Okay. I've come up with, I'd call it 3+1. There's 3 main points that I think if you focus on these, I think you can establish really beyond doubt that 9/11 had to have been orchestrated with insider complicity, that goes very broadly in the U.S. intelligence services and military-industrial complex, something like that. There had to have been connections at that kind of a level, but we don't start there. We're starting with hard evidence. The first is the dynamics of the way the buildings came down. We have good material about that. The second is the fires and the temperatures that were achieved in these fires. And the third is the fact that we've actually found remnants of a material called nanothermite in the dust. These, I think, are the strongest case that we have that something very sinister is going on in 9/11. It's not something that was just an outside attack from Arabs or Afghans or anybody else who you want to think was involved here. I say 3+1. The other element is the cover-up. Probably as strong as any of the main lines of evidence is evidence of a cover-up. And when there's a cover-up, it's, in my mind, that's strong evidence that there's something somebody wants covered up. And so I'd like to go back and focus on, in terms of what do we know on each of these grounds.
And that's what the mission here at 9/11 Freefall is about focusing on what we do know, on the science and the hard evidence, and that which is going to get us a real investigation and ultimately justice for the victims of 9/11. And as I say it in the interview, it is very important that we attack the silliness out there, the disinformation, so that when people, for instance, if they're watching C-SPAN and they hear someone calling in about Building 7 and they get curious when they're Googling it, that, you know, if they're looking up information, let's say, about the free fall acceleration, that we don't have some nonsense about no planes hitting the towers mixed in there. I mean, it's going to exist out there. You can't do anything about it existing. People have a right to free speech, but we have to thoroughly point to where that doesn't measure up with reality. So, again, hence the reason for tonight's show. So before I play my interview with John Michael Talbot discussing that and other things, we're going to do what we do every week. We're going to take 10 seconds of silence to remember the victims of 9/11 and their families and all the people who died in the wars that followed 9/11. We're going to do that starting now. And that is 10 seconds.
John Michael Talbot is the webmaster at Debunking the Debunkers site. That's at www.911debunkers.blogspot.com. He's been a guest on the show to talk about some of the great articles that they feature there. He's also filled in for me as the host of the show recently. Well, he's back today to discuss with me disinformation and some of the forms of disinformation that's out there and some of the examples of that kind of disinformation that comes up in the 9/11 truth movement, particularly with the no-planer theory. Welcome back, John.
I'm glad to be back. How are you?
I'm doing good, and again, thank you so much for filling in for me that weekend. Great
My
show.
pleasure. My pleasure.
Now, I got my own reasons for why I want to dedicate a show to disinformation. And you wrote an article about it. It got me thinking about it and why a show like this is long overdue, because it is an important topic, even if some of the stuff floating around out there is complete nonsense. You know, I've got an open mind. I'm a very open-minded person, and I like to look at every piece of information, and I like to take people seriously, but when the facts don't add up, when the theories don't float up to the surface, I guess, you know, they need to be proven as such, have a light shined on them, and then, you know, so that the hard evidence, the real stuff, can be even more focused on. So that's that's the reason I think it's important. Why do you think it's important enough to dedicate a show to this?
Well, I'll tell you first off, look, even if they were totally right about some aspect of this, and there's different views on the no-planer thing, there's not just one theory, there's different theories we'll have to address. But the thing is, let's say it was completely true, any one of those. It's not going to get us anywhere. It's going to turn the public off. You're basically asking them to believe they didn't see something that they think they saw. Whereas with demolition, we're only trying to get them to understand that what they saw was caused by something different. So it's a totally different psychological thing, you know, and we're only trying to get a new investigation. And so you got to strategize with that. So even if these people are totally, you know, not disinformation or not deluded or whatever, we can speculate on that all day. Their approach is, even if they were completely right, it's not going to be effective. I've often said we need to focus, and it's my personal opinion, that there is a plethora of a mountain of prior knowledge that indicates complicity. You know, I actually wrote about this recently, if I can just read a little something. I said, let's see here. I said, we might be wrong about where we suspect all this leads, but the debunkers are wrong when many essentially argue that it's acceptable for 70% of 9/11 family members' questions to have never been answered by the 9/11 Commission. So, of course, most have, and talking about debunkers, most have no qualms about promises made to 9/11 family members being broken by the Commission to investigate all whistleblower claims, which a substantial amount of the public find highly suspicious at minimum, with many regarding the evidence as suggestive of complicity to varied degrees. So again, these fine patriots are just dandy with controlled demolition being ruled out by skipping key forensic tests, and it stands to reason that these ilk feel the lack of air defense story is above scrutiny to the point that secrecy and rewards are warranted. So what if this tale consists of 3, or some contend 4, mutually contradictory versions of events and admitted lies? It makes perfect sense that the top officials from NORAD and the FAA received promotions, as opposed to having to provide documents with data that would prove that the jet fighters were acceptably responsive given the past response time averages. And so I think focusing on the demolition, the prior knowledge, the family members' questions, and you know, the documents from NORAD not being released, that's all we need, in my opinion, you know. But so people could disagree with that, add a bit more here and there, but no planes, definitely not needed and not helping. So that's why.
Right. Yeah, and you know, and we're going to get more into the no planer thing, and I'm going to just admit a ton of ignorance on this theory. I've never taken it seriously myself. And again, I'm not trying to sound like some people who will consider the whole 9/11 issue a non-starter. I don't want to sound like that. It's just that I've never heard anyone make a rational argument for that, so I've never really even went.
Well, there is no rational argument for it, first of all. not empirically when you look at the evidence, not to me. And I won't claim to be the expert of all experts, and I didn't even really write an article. I compiled a lot of information together that I think is important for people to see. You know, but I think that has just as much merit sometimes, just consolidating good information. So,
right, and I just want to ask, because the first thing I would say, and again, not being an expert on that theory, just my first common sense question would be, and I wasn't in New York on 9/11, but there were a lot of people on the street who saw a plane crashing into the building or saw something.
Correct.
Now, people will debate about what it was in that level, but they saw. It was not a cartoon, as some of these theories claim, crashing into the towers on TV. They saw a plane crashing right into the building.
Right. So the first place to start off is that some people say that it was TV fakery, basically that the planes weren't there and that, you know, that they were not there at all, okay? So it was just faked through TV. Well, first of all, like you said, people saw it. Secondly, we have footage from amateurs. We have footage from several news sources. That would mean that all these people would have to be in on it, and Occam's razor tells me that is ridiculous, and it's completely unnecessary to the perpetrators to do that, when it makes more sense to fly the planes into the buildings, however you want to think that was done, by remote control. It doesn't matter. It just doesn't make sense. Secondly, and this is from Jim Hoffman here, the whole it's from an article that he links to, but the hole in the north tower is the size of a 767. It shows a frontal diagram on the page I made, which if people want to see it, go to the site, Debunking the Debunkers, and scroll down, and it's called Updated, Debunking September Clues and No Plane Theories. And it shows the diagram, and it's superimposed in scale over the tower. The width is 207 feet of a 767 wingspan. Equals 156 feet, says, and rotate it to align with the impact hole. Point is it's quite a good fit. You can see that it makes sense, that it wasn't just a bomb that blew up. I mean, I guess you could blow a bomb up theoretically in the size of the plane right where it hit, but then again, it's just overcomplicating the situation. Do you know what I mean? And
is that what they claim happened? That a cartoon hit the towers on TV and that a bomb really blew it up?
Well, they think it was TV, like special effects, basically. Now, there's other people that say they were holograms. Okay. Now, again, if they're holograms,
the
what's that?
So did they broadcast a hologram over the city?
Yep. And so when it comes to that, I guess the videos don't, prove anything, if you want to believe that. Does the hole in the building matching up still matter? Yeah, that still matters. But there was plane wreckage found. So here's the thing. We get down to the plane wreckage. There's remains of an engine that passed through the South Tower, resting at the corner of Church and Murray Streets. Now, they'll claim for this, that doesn't look like the right plane wreckage. Well, Jim Hoffman has photographs of remains of Flights 11 and 175. He says the photographs compiled here document some of the remains of the jetliners commandeered on 9/11, and then he has an essay that rebuts claims that the photographed debris could not have been from the crashed jetliners. But think about this on another level. If they were going to plant evidence of plane parts, why would they plant evidence of plane parts that weren't the right plane parts? No logical sense, again. So the plane parts being found is a huge deal. So we got the engine, and then a portion of the fuselage of United Airlines 175 landed on the roof of World Trade Center 5. There's pictures of that. There's a picture of a landing gear from 9/11 that was found. It's on an Infowars.com article, actually, but I think they derived it from it might be from a UK Daily Mail source, actually. But what it shows is that the Twin Towers, it was a few blocks away, I believe. Let's see, because it was at 51 Park Place, New York. They found the landing gear. So it was wedged between two buildings just blocks from ground zero. So, and again, it matches up. When you look at these parts and you're being empirical about it, they are the parts they should be. So, okay, so let's say they get over the argument that the parts are right. Well, they still had to stage all that. That's a lot of risk. They still had to hope their hologram was believable, and then they had to sneak in the plane parts. And again, we go back to Occam's razor. It makes no sense. Why not just have planes crash into the buildings? But then they'll say things like, go ahead.
Well, just before you go on with that, I want to ask you about the hologram thing. Because the first I've really ever heard that. I went to Disney World when I was a kid. I went through the Haunted Mansion ride, and they showed the hologram ghosts.
Yeah, I went through that, yeah.
Around. And, it's cool, it's pretty, it looks like a realistic ghost, but ghosts are translucent. Now, is there any kind of technology that exists? And the reason I'm trying to play devil's advocate here,
sure.
I'm not a no-planer, folks, but I can already see the YouTube comments lighting up with
sure.
angry no-planers here. So I want to ask, is there any kind of technology that exists that can broadcast a clear, crisp image of a jetliner flying over New York City to the point where it looks like a jetliner and not like some kind of ghost ship in a comic book?
To my knowledge, no. But is it getting better every day? Yes. I've seen things purported to be holograms put over China. I can't vouch for the validity, but if it's true, it looks like they put a real city hologram out there. I've seen Tupac rap on stage, although somewhat translucent, he looked pretty damn real. And you got to assume a lot of people think that the government's technology is ahead of ours. So could it be possible? Theoretically. But then you got to, like I said, you got to plan all the parts. You got to not get caught doing that. and it's just not logical. It doesn't make sense. And even if you want to tell yourself every reason in the world that it does make sense, does it make sense for you to focus on this when there's so much other absolutely provable stuff? Like that stuff I went through in the beginning, that's stuff that can get a new investigation, and it doesn't matter whether you think you know it was an inside job or anything. It's to achieve that goal, right? Isn't the goal a new investigation? Or is it to raise public awareness? If it's to raise public awareness, you're not going to do that, because knowledge is power. We want to let them know. We don't want, maybe that can stop things. Again, the same point. This is not going to do it. It's going to turn people away.
So the point I want to raise, though, that I have a problem with this is that the sound. People heard the plane flying in over the city.
Sure. And so that would take another kind of technology, There were people that heard the jetliner. Well, actually, I backed that up. They said, never mind, that was when the buildings fell. They said it sounded like another jetliner flying overhead, and this was miles away. So that tells you the explosions were really loud, although the debunkers like to say they weren't. But to get back to the point, yeah, they'd have to have some kind of other technology involved as well, complicating things even more, to make people hear the sound with it. So.
Well, here's the other thing, too, is when the plane comes flying into the city and crashes into the tower, you would have to make it so that the bombs in the building go off, and the plane appears to crinkle in and vaporize as it hits the building, and without it completely disappearing. So not only would you have to create some kind of optical illusion of an airplane flying over the city, and also put in the sound to get that realistic plane noise in everybody's ears for the witnesses, but you'd also have to time the bombs in the building to go off to coincide with the plane crash, and then have the hologram shift and appear to look like a plane crashing into a building.
Yeah, and the whole would have to match.
Into a building.
The whole would have to match completely. Not saying that's impossible, but I'm sure there were people that saw parts fly out and then they found parts. I haven't really looked into that, really, like who saw what fly where or whatever. But here's the thing. They try to point out things like there's this whole nose out thing, and they try to say that you can see the nose of the plane penetrate out the other side because it's fake. All right. So first of all, I would suggest people go to Nose Out Hoax on YouTube and watch that video. But even 9/11 Myths, okay? I give credit where credit's due. Debunkers are not always wrong. 9/11 Myths shows on their page, and their page is called, it's 911myths.com. It's called Further Debunking of the 9/11 TV Fakery Nose Out Claim. And it shows you, through images and then moving images, what's going on. And I took an excerpt, and here's what it shows. It shows when 3 of the stills are placed together, it is manifestly clear that this is not one seamless animation of a plane nose. And finally, when the stills are turned into an animation, we can witness the shape changes in action. In conclusion, these images demonstrate that what is being seen exiting the South Tower is not CGI plane, but is clearly debris being expelled from the building, followed by a huge explosion. So in every case, there is an explanation way more logical than what they're proposing. And I've heard that these no-planer, I see it myself a lot, they're stuck on it. That's all they want to talk about. They don't want it. We had somebody call in on Jeff Hill's Pumping Out radio program, and to be honest, he got me a bit heated. He was, I don't break temper that much, and especially don't try to do it in an interview. But this guy was just like, Adam handled him well. He stayed calm. He handled his points. And I was just like, have you not heard what we've been talking about for the last 3 hours about peer-reviewed papers and NORAD and this and that? Isn't that better evidence, sir? And his answer was, no, I don't think so. Well, okay. Well, to each his own. But they seem a bit disruptive at times. They seem like a little too focused. And so you tell me, disinformation, misinformation, delusion, I don't know.
Well, let's get to that, because here's the deal. The first time I ever encountered these people, I was at a protest at Ground Zero. We Are Change was leading it. And, you got the people out there with the black shirts and protesting, controlled demolition.
Or just, it started out with just ask questions, demand answers. Better than saying 9/11's an inside job, actually.
There you go. And so, but you have the people out there who are protesting I guess what you would call the more mainstream 9/11 truth positions. And then these folks show up, these two guys, and they've got dragon costumes on.
Right, yeah, and Jason Bermas talked about this. They were just an embarrassment. They were just, they were a distraction. They made us look ridiculous. I've heard him talk about this, yeah.
Yeah, it's a banner that said "No planes hit the buildings," September clues, and they're trying to jump in front of the We Are Change. We Are Change was doing something with the banner. My memory is a little hazy of this now because it was a couple of years ago. But they're trying to, display a banner on their video. So these guys are showing up. They're dressed ridiculous, like they're like crazy.
Puff the Magic Dragon, right?
Yeah, Puff the Magic Dragon, and then they tried to get in front of the We Are Change banner, and it became this weird kind of struggle between guys trying to get their banner in front of the camera.
And see,
but I just want to conclude the story because here's the deal.
Sorry.
I knew why these guys were there because I could just tell that they were there to distract everybody with nonsense and to create disinformation. And I said to one of the guys, the dragon costumes are a nice touch. Like kind of knowingly, like I know what you're doing, and he gave me this kind of look, and he was just like almost like we kind of understood, both of us understood each other, and he knew that I knew what he was doing, and he just kind of sneers at me, he's like, thanks. And that's kind of, so I've kind of known what that's about ever since, and I'm glad that we're talking about this now. Cause
I wonder what that thanks would be. Thanks for understanding that this is just my job.
Well, just thanks for I know it was a nice touch. We thought of this last night, or just kind of it was a nice touch, and what are you going to do about it?
But they talk about cognitive infiltration, right? Cass Sunstein, that whole thing. David Ray Griffin wrote a book about it, infiltrating conspiracy groups and disrupting, and that's been going on since the Black Panthers, COINTELPRO, and that doesn't mean they agree with us. It could just mean they think that it's harmful to morale or whatever. I think a lot of things might be covered up and not looked into because they're afraid of what they might find, and if they do find that we're right, how's that going to affect our standing in the world and our respect in the world? And I will agree that it will probably hurt us at first, but the truth eventually will redeem us. That's my opinion.
It's just a huge blemish on the face of our national character, the fact that this evidence exists. More people are waking up to it all the time. The politicians can seem to do, with the exception of a very few of them, can seem to do nothing but dodge the issue.
And I think they know.
Yeah. And this doesn't look good. This doesn't look good for our country that's supposed to be the most powerful in the world. We're really showing that we have no clothes, that we're really not as the country we thought we were, and it's harmful. And so it's an unpleasant truth, but we're not going to be the country we once believed ourselves to be until we unearth that. And and when these people come out with these silly nonsense theories that I think are inserted, and again, I know that's speculation. I don't have hard proof of that. Just kind of instinctive intuition.
Well, you have precedent to think that, and then you have your own experience seeing how they act. So I think it's an educated guess. Just to get back to one thing about whole 9/11 was an inside job. I've said it. You can find it on my website. Okay. But people take things too literally. It's to get your attention. It's to make you. And you know what? If there was inside involvement, and it's an inside job still. If they allowed it to happen or amplified the result, it's still an inside job. But I've come more to the position of that we should get back to ask questions, demand answers. I support the family members, stuff like that, because it's more effective. And a statement I also have, if you just let me read real quick, I said, many people subconsciously make the mistake of only seeing the issues concerning 9/11 in black and white as opposed to shades of gray. This is known as the black or white fallacy. In this case, the false dilemma is 9/11 was either carried out by Al-Qaeda or it was an inside job. I said, just because the evidence suggests that rogue criminal elements of U.S. and other international intelligence agencies were involved doesn't mean, and that would be the point is rogue criminal elements there, because people often think we're blaming the whole government. But anyway, other international intelligence agencies were involved doesn't mean bin Laden and al-Qaeda hijackers weren't. And I said, so, in the fight to uncover the truth about 9/11, we must contend with individuals and groups that distort, omit, and lie about important details in order to defend the official narrative, the 9/11 truth debunkers. And it seems to me that the people that have hijacked the word skepticism, the pseudo-skeptics, they are establishment defenders. It could be because that's just they claim we want things to be more comfortable. It's easier to think that than to think we have this enemy, and that is ridiculous. I'm way more scared if there's people on the inside doing this. More people die from Tylenol or aspirin every year than terrorism. You're more likely to get struck by lightning.
Well, I was happier when I was happier just and felt safer when I believed the official story, because it happened.
Yeah, me too.
But I thought okay, it happened. They got away with it, but there's no way in hell they're ever going to let people take control of a plane again. They're never going to let that happen again.
And at the time I didn't like Bush. Sorry to cut you off, but I thought, well, I don't like him, but he's going to take care of business. Totally different mindset. And just like I have a totally nuanced view now, I'm willing to adapt to the evidence and think things out. The debunkers are rigid. They're rigid as hell. They don't, I've found a few that are willing, that I've talked to. One in particular on JREF is Ben Oystein. A lot of people don't like him, but we had personal conversations where I told him where I'm coming from. He explained where he was coming from. And I said, look, we're just having a disagreement, man. There's no reason to get nasty. Let's talk it out. Let's figure it out. I'm trying to figure out the nanothermite thing, funding a study and all this. And I said, and if it's wrong, it's wrong. I'll be the first one to admit it. But I said, that if it wasn't nanothermite, that doesn't prove it wasn't explosives. And when we got into that on the last show, and he said, no, you can never prove that it wasn't, actually. But, depending on what we can find forensically, then it might be the time to start, pushing FOIA requests more and documents and just do what we can. But like you said in a past episode, you're doing it because it's the right thing to do, no matter what. Even if there's not a chance at hell, what is a moral person supposed to do? You do what you can, right?
Right. Well, I was just going to say, you were talking about people getting nasty with each other, and that's another tragedy of the post-9/11 world, is that it's had to come to that. But the 9/11 Truth site didn't start it first. Where it was started was people like Bill O'Reilly or Sean Hannity jumping down people's throats for asking simple questions. Okay, I mean, in a perfect world, we could be having these discussions while playing chess or sipping coffee, and people could talk it out. But now it's gotten to the point where people made it nasty. People on the other side, people in the quote-unquote mainstream media.
Yeah, I don't know. There were probably debunkers out before that acting that way, but that seeing it in the mainstream only encourages them and empowers them to continue it.
Well, what happened, though, is that even on 9/11 Truth site, I mean, you see yourself being kind of shut down, not losing the argument, but just having your speech shut down. Where they don't present both sides, and so that does make you.
They censor on JREF. Period. There's a couple of other JREF forums right now that are kind of copying the name for the band and for the ones that don't want to deal with the bull. So we can take back the power and say, you know what? We'll take a similar name and we'll start our own thing. We're not going to play their game in their house. You know what I mean? We're going to play on our own terms.
But see, my point is that they made the debate so hostile in the beginning that people have gone into camps and there's just viciously guarded to the point where you do look at the other side as your enemy. And I'm guilty of this too. I've done it, for years. I've been in this since 2006, and again, it keeps you from being able to just look at the facts, and it's so hard to get over just the implications of the evidence and people. That you add all this to it, all the drama and emotion of the debate itself. It just makes it for a very difficult situation for all parties involved. And add on to that, we started off talking about disinformation. People calling into C-SPAN about Building 7, they may awaken some audience member to go Google it. And it does not help things when somebody goes and Googles information about controlled demolition and then mixed in that is some goofball saying that no plane hit the building. Because then they just associate that. They're not as knowledgeable as maybe an audience member who knows all the different groups, has researched it themselves, knows all the different factions. They're just thinking that it's all one conspiracy theory.
I've talked to people who were like, well, planes hit the building that day, and I'm like, whoa, back up. Wait a second. And that aggravates me anyway. People want to talk to me about a subject, and I'm like, have you read one book on it? Okay, can you read the book and then we talk? But unfortunately it doesn't work like that. So that's another good reason for this topic. We need to be real clear about what we support collectively and what we don't, and I believe the no-planers are a minority. You know, I think 9/11 Truth has, we've stopped infighting as much. You know, we've tried to make amends where we can. I have anyway. And, I see that more and more. And, you know, I've even cut down on what activism I promote, because if you put your eggs in, you know, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, you know? So it's like, to me right now, I want to say on the air, everybody should get out to New York. I was out there on the 10th. I'd hope to see you. You wanted me to go last year. I couldn't. But there's a website called groundzero911.com, and it's public outreach in New York City every September to get people out there to protest. So I would encourage that. And I totally see your point. It has turned nasty. But I've realized that you can, if you insist on civility, then, you know, it's either civility or I don't talk to you, period. To get back to, unless you want to go somewhere else, but I had a few more things to say. Jim Hoffman, I respect to the umpteenth degree. Hoffman's work on 911research.wtc7.net is what got a lot of people inspired, a lot of the academics and stuff, you know. And he says, he has a page called, if you go to 911review.com, his other site, he has a section called errors, and one of them is the Phantom Planes, and it's called the Phantom Planes Meme. And it says the idea that the crashes of jetliners on 9/11 were faked has been the staple of disinformation and misinformation, standing in the way of exposing the nature of the crimes that day. So it goes back to what we were saying, you know.
Well, what it does is it puts you on the defensive from the beginning, and I think that's what it's designed to do. Again, this is speculation, educated guess. But you know what it does, like you start talking about 105 feet of free fall in Building 7. You know, you start talking about thermitic materials found in the dust, and then somebody who's come across the no plane nonsense says, well, come on, I saw a plane hit the building. Or you say, I've seen these, and people say that it was space aliens that brought down the towers, or that, that there was a hologram that hit the tower. And so what it does is it puts somebody who's talking about the facts on the defensive, and that puts you in a position of weakness in an argument when you have to say, no, I don't think that. I don't think that. You know, I know a plane hit the tower, and I think that's part of why that it gets put out there. You know, I think that's why some of these things are promoted.
And the best way to handle that is say, well, that's not the consensus among the community as far as I know it. There are some simple facts that I believe in, and then you educate them. You know, that's all you can do. As far as getting other people to change their minds, they believe in it. Maybe they will. But another thing about aluminum, I said about the pumpkin analogy, right? Did I make that up? Right.
Yeah, I want you to talk about that. There's some fun videos on the net about this.
Now, Jeff Hill from Pump It Out Radio, he used to be a complete no-planer until he kept learning and learning and learning. It's like I told somebody not to bring up one of my other interests because I'm still open-minded about it, but I find the evidence compelling. My buddy wanted to make a joke about Bigfoot, and it was no big deal. I said, look, I thought I didn't believe in it 2 years ago. Now I think it's very possible. But I said, look, the thing is because I thought I was well read up on it until I realized I wasn't. So that's the same with anything. And by the way, a belief in aliens or this or that has nothing to do with it. That's another, it's a logical fallacy. You have to judge people on how they handle each one of those things they believe in, how logical they are about it, how honest they are about it, and how they approach it, you know. There can be the poisoned well idea, but there's also I feel like I shouldn't be hindered in exploring anything I want to explore, but I explore it all from the same way. I'm nuanced. I'm willing to change position. You know, I'm willing to listen to alternative arguments. So, but if people look up Jeff Hill, look at some of his old stuff, and then look at why he's changed his mind. Okay? If they want an example of somebody who was them and now is somebody that's more like us, you know, even though he's not big on demolition, but I'm just saying he's changed a lot from that. And he put out a video called 9/11 No Planer, Open Your Eyes, Warplanes versus Metal. And I have a picture under that. It's the USS Hindendale, damage inflicted on April 1st, 1945 from a kamikaze. And this kamikaze plane hit this big steel warship and put a hole right through it. So I think the analogy is pretty good there. You know?
Well, I've heard people say that aluminum can't cut through steel. There's some really cool videos of pumpkin guns. I didn't know these things existed until I saw the video. But can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically the kinetic energy. The link I have here now used to have the video, but you can find them all over YouTube. And this was an anti-truther person that put it up, but I looked at it. And so she says, truthers ask. It's all about kinetic energy. She says, a loaded 767 through 200 traveling at 500 miles per hour packs 2.87 10 over 9. I'm not real good with that, but a lot of joules. That's what she says after that. She says that's a lot of energy. All right. She says if you divide up that up into the number of columns severed, it's more strain energy than the column can absorb without failing in traverse shear. But aluminum is less dense and much softer than steel, right? She says it sure is. So is a pumpkin. Click this link and watch a pumpkin punch right through a steel car door. It's the kinetic energy. And it's as simple as that. You know,
right. You watch these videos and they're shooting a pumpkin through the car door, and they shoot it through a boat and all sorts of metal objects.
It's the energy. It's the kinetic energy. It has the power to do it when it's put out fast enough. And those planes are traveling at what?
Right. So basically, you told me, and again, I'm not an expert on the no-planar theory. I'm learning a lot about it pretty much just from your article and from listening to you right now. So are there any other tiers to the no-planar theory, anything that we haven't covered, anything that you think somebody might try to bite back at us?
Yeah, there's a few that Adam Taylor touches on. If you can just give me a second, I'll go to his link and kind of go over that a little bit, because he's up on a few things I'm not. He has a link on our site called 5 No-Planar Claims Refuted. And and he actually says here, this is for anyone who still thinks the no-plane theories have any credibility. Please consider this my public statement about no-plane theories. They have no merit and are all wrong. When people say the plane does not, he's saying the plane does decelerate. And he's got 2 links. Interpreting the Boeing 7767 deceleration during impact with the World Trade Center tower. So that's not something I'm whole up on, but that's something they can look up that Adam speaks about. He gets into the TV fakery, and then impossible speed, he says no. Simulator proves impossible speed was probable for Flight 11 and 175. And then he has 2 more links about how the speed was definitely possible. Of course, then he gets into, can planes penetrate steel structures? Yes. And were there reliable witnesses? Yes. If you want to get back just to who's seeing them, Kevin Pfeiffer watched as the plane came in and killed his brother who was in the towers.
Right, and I just want to point out, and I think I'll probably point it out in the intro to this show when I record it later, but David Chandler's got a new video out talking about what the hard evidence is. For the controlled demolition. And that's what we really need to be focusing on, even beyond complicity. Who is complicit? Because, again, this is the whole point of the show, is that we want to focus on what you can prove. That's what's going to be what gets you the new investigation. That's going to be what opens up more people's eyes. And it doesn't help anything, and I think deliberately is not helping anything for those people who put out these ridiculous ideas. And it's not just the no-planar thing. It's the stuff that no Jews died in the towers. And the History Channel picks up on this. They bring on some woman. They'll first of all say that all 9/11 truthers think that no Jews died in the towers on 9/11. And then they get this woman on there to say, my brother was a Jew and he died.
Sure.
And then the audience looks at that and thinks, oh, see, they've been thoroughly debunked. That's a straw man argument.
I have a blog called What Does It Mean for the 9/11 Truth Movement if James R. Millett proves nanothermite wasn't used to take down the towers? Now, I don't want to read it point by point, but my point is that, like, the upper section destroyed, therefore can't crush the lower section. That's what Tony's papers have been about recently. You have, 10, 15 stories in either case, and they go right through the cores. They crush everything straight to the ground. They've done independent studies that show this is not possible. And even Frank Greening, a debunker, just did a study where they tested this, and the collapse always arrests itself at some point and topples over. And that's what a lot of firefighters thought was going to happen. They also were told that the structures were sound, and they were, from what I can tell, that they were tested for such things. Leslie Robertson, who was not the chief structural engineer. It was actually, can't think offhand, but it's Leslie Robertson that I believe. Anyway, the point is, the guy that the debunkers point to as being like the chief of the whole design thing, he really wasn't. He was not the head of it. And here he says, well, I've seen no reports of molten metal. I've heard no one say that. And then we found a video where he says that he saw molten metal running. So he's lying. I don't know why, but the conflict is he says we didn't prepare. We prepared for a low-speed impact, this and that, and then Port Authority documents surfaced that they tested for 600-mile-an-hour air impacts from a 707, which is very comparable in fuel capacity, in wingspan and everything, and they did not. He says they didn't take into account the fire. Well, the report says that they took into account fire and jet fuel getting into the building, and that it would cause a big fire, but there would be no chance of collapse. So that's what the lead guy in this says. It's John Skilling, I believe. Even if nothing's forensically proven, we're still left with the physical evidence, and that's not going to go away. On that page I was talking about, and I hate to keep saying here, go there, but it will help people to look at it. The article is called "What Does It Mean for the 9/11 Truth Movement If James R. Millett Proves Nanothermite Wasn't Used to Take Down the Towers?" At the bottom, there's and Adam had put this together. It's Tony Sambati, 30-minute interview that he did for the extended cut for Experts Speak Out. And he takes it minute by minute when he brings up a point and then puts up a link to prove it. And so listen to these. South Tower wall, World Trade Center 1, buckling columns, a bowing inward. He's got a refutation. Manipulated sagging models. NIST stopped at collapse initiation. Problems with Dr. Bazant's analysis. NIST distorted tilt. Bazant's deceleration flaws. Varanage demolitions refute arguments. Upper section destroyed, therefore can't crush lower section. NIST unable to provide a full explanation for the total collapse. Exaggerated sagging. No explanation for high temperatures. NIST misrepresents design loads of the towers. Small amount of steel saved for analysis. No explanation for molten metal flow from World Trade Center 2. NIST acknowledges free fall. A NIST World Trade Center model doesn't match the videos, and they won't release them either so we can study them. NIST model resembles natural collapse, but not World Trade Center 7 collapse. NIST's illogical reasons for dismissing controlled demolition, which, included them totally denying, again, that they've ever seen any witnesses talk about molten metal, and we can go on with videos for 13, 15 minutes where people are talking about it. Molten steel, molten metal, molten iron, whatever. They're saying they didn't see nothing like that. The guy in Loose Change says, well, there's NASA pictures, and he says, will you send them to me? And then when he tried to get his email and contact, he just blew him off. They had no interest in a real investigation. They committed scientific fraud, and if you want proof of that, read The Mysterious Collapse of World Trade Center 7 by David Ray Griffin. It's excellent. It shows how they committed scientific fraud, period. Okay, that doesn't mean they're involved in it, but somebody's pulling the strings, telling, I've basically been heard, and this is from a NIST whistleblower, that they're compromised and political decisions dictate what they do, basically. So you're not going to find what you're not looking for or what you're told to not look for if you want your job, and maybe if you're worried about the implications of what if it was true. And that's why, like with Eric Lawyer, he said, we have 100 signatures. He said, but I know from personal experience there's probably 500 firefighters, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, how many died? 343? The debunkers throw that in our face all the time as if we know these dead people agree with them. Well, there's more firefighters that are agreeing that it was controlled demolition than died, and don't they deserve
the debunkers say that the dead firefighters agree with them?
I've seen it implied, yeah. Like it dishonors their memories, and I've been called an FDNY-hating scumbag just because I brought up testimony of like a firefighter who said, yeah, Building 7, we were told that it might be, it was coming down or it might be taken down. That doesn't mean he was involved. If anything, if ever the implication came up that the firefighters were involved, it came from Larry Silverstein's statement.
And regardless of how it was even done, I mean, again, somebody on the street just getting commands and just following orders that day does not necessarily mean that they are even if they're acting in a way that following the orders lends their complicity to the event. It doesn't mean that they were actually complicit. They're just cogs in the wheel, especially during 9/11 when nobody knows really what's going on. Everyone's freaked out. Everyone's scared. Even the firefighters are scared. So, I mean, you know, they're basically just going to follow orders that day. And that's really all that's implied.
Think about them just going in the building. If they thought that building was going to fall, if there was any chance, they wouldn't have had 343 firefighters in there.
Right.
You know?
Right, exactly.
Frank DiMartini, who, do you remember his role? He was,
no.
He was involved with the, architecture. He was involved in the building design in some way, or was very aware of it. And we could look up his credentials real quick. But he said, you know, that basically these buildings are built to where it's like a screen door. You puncture a hole through it, the screen stays intact. And he believed that so much that he went back in that day to save people, and he died a hero because it collapsed on him. Not to say he wouldn't have went back in either way, okay? But I believe that he thought he was fine to go back in. You know, that's a reasonable assumption because he didn't believe it would collapse. To finish Tony's points real quick that are in that article, it's a secret retrofit of Citibank Tower refutes NIST arguments basically that it couldn't be done in secret. NIST misrepresents World Trade Center construction. It refuses to release data. They don't address the sulfidized steel that FEMA told them to address, where we have World Trade Center steel, verified steel that was basically attacked, you know, to where it was paper thinness, and they couldn't explain it. They don't know, some kind of eutectic reaction, sulfur. No other steel from World Trade Center saved for analysis. NIST never looked at any World Trade Center steel in their investigation, and that's true because FEMA did. NIST misrepresented the fire severity. That's proven very easily. The South Tower fire severity, John Gross, like I said, denies molten metal at ground zero. They admit it. They never test for explosives.
And I don't want to interrupt you, but we are out of time, though, for this show.
No problem.
We're going to have to end it here. John, it was fascinating to have you on. I love bringing you on because you can talk and talk and talk, and the hour just goes by really fast here. So thank you so much.
You're welcome, sir. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Remember, you can hear this program every Thursday night on No Lies Radio at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. You can also download the show by going to 911freefall.com. This is Andy Steele saying have a great week and good luck.